Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. Today we are going over 11 players that you need to target in fantasy football before week number 5. We're starting it off with Jaylen Waddle. I think he is a clear buy low candidate in my eyes. So far, up to this point in the season, Jaylen Waddle fantasy owners are not having a good time whatsoever. 11.8 in week number 1, 12.4 in week number 2, 8.6 in week number 4 against the Buffalo Bills after returning from that concussion in week 2. Buffalo was piling it on in this game, right? Giving the Dolphins basically a taste of their own medicine on what they did to the Broncos. They said, listen, you thought that was impressive. We're gonna put up massive numbers on you and see how you like it. They didn't like it too much. All right. In this game, Tyreek Hill couldn't even get going. I don't think this is any reason to panic on Jaylen Waddle whatsoever. Tyreek had 3 catches for 58 yards in this contest. The Bills as a whole just have a great passing defense. Their defense is solid, all right? And they did a great job at containing 2 of the best players on this team, Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle. As for the snap count goes, we usually talk about that in these videos. It wasn't limited at all for Jaylen Waddle, which we expected because concussions usually don't limit snap counts at all or any productivity for that matter. He actually played more snaps than any other wide receiver on the team in this game. As for the rest of the season, right, their schedule is pretty easy compared to most of the teams that I've been looking at recently. The Dolphins are a team that they're going to pile on points on points on points against bad defenses. Now, I would say the only tough defenses that the Dolphins are about to go against this season, you could maybe say the Panthers, the Patriots, the Chiefs, and then very late in the season, they get the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills again. But that Bills game, I don't even know if that's in the fantasy football schedule. So other than that, all the opponents are pretty easy, and I know Tua is going to ball out. I know Jaylen Waddle is going to come back, so trade for him while his value is super low right now. Next up, we have Devonta Smith. I don't really know if I would call Devonta Smith a buy low necessarily right now, but he might not be exactly what everybody had hoped for to take that next step forward just yet in the season, but I think he still will, and you're going to hear me out. I'm going to tell you exactly why here quickly. Before we continue, if you guys are new to this channel, consider hitting that subscribe button. Also, drop a thumbs up on this video at the end if you did enjoy. Devonta Smith, though, back to him. Up until Monday night, he was the 12th ranked wide receiver in fantasy, so not bad whatsoever. Like I said, a lot of people were expecting him to take that next step forward, even finish ahead of A.J. Brown this year. It could still happen. It has a real possibility of happening, but it's going to happen in the second half of the year. I got to give him props, though. Against the Washington Commanders, that catch was amazing, where he mossed 2 people, I believe it was. Absolutely unbelievable catch. He makes these catches look so easy. I'll tell you that much. All right, the first 2 games, Devonta Smith went crazy. He went on a scoring tear, 17.7 and 23.1 fantasy points. But at the moment, he isn't quite getting the amount of attention that A.J. Brown is since he had that sideline conversation with Jalen Hurts. Both of these guys are going to perform throughout the season. It's no surprise whatsoever. Eventually, A.J. Brown's going to cool down. He's going to have his off games here and there, and then you're going to get those opportunities for Devonta Smith to go crazy. Some weeks, Smith's going to go crazy. Some weeks, Brown's going to go crazy. It's kind of like a 1A, 1B situation. If we're comparing it to another team, I would say like the Bengals last year where Jamar Chase went crazy almost every single game, and then T. Higgins would have his days. T. Higgins would have his days here and there. I think that's the situation that we're looking at. Their schedule for the rest of the year here is going to get insanely difficult, which means they are going to be in shootouts. This is a team, Philadelphia Eagles, are known to run the ball down their opponents' throats when they get an early lead. These are some games where it's going to be tough to get that early lead. All right, let's go through. After their next 2 games, I believe they play the Rams this week, and then they get... I'm drawing a blank right now. We'll put it on screen for you if I can find it. I know I'll be able to find it. I'll put it on screen for you. But they play the Dolphins after that, the Commanders, the Cowboys, the Chiefs, the Bills, the 49ers, the Cowboys again, and the Seahawks all in a row. Those are not easy games by any means. So Devonta Smith's going to have to go crazy. A.J. Brown's going to have to play his role. I expect DeAndre Swift to get more involved in the passing game in these matchups where you're not going to be able to run it down these opponents' throats time and time again. You're not going to have a massive lead to lean on. So Devonta Smith is going to do great the rest of the season. Trade for him right now before he starts going crazy. Next up, we have Deebo Samuel. Deebo turned in a pretty unbearable performance against the Cardinals on Sunday. He finished with just 0.6 PPR fantasy points and did not see a single target the entire matchup. A few things to note here. Number one, he was dealing with that injury from last week with his ribs heading into this game, and now he's also day-to-day nursing a knee injury. At least that's what I saw on the injury report this week. Number two is that the 49ers were absolutely destroying the Cardinals ever since the beginning of this game. They were not losing at any point, which therefore led to Brock Purdy only having to attempt 21 passes in this game. Of course, we would have liked to see a target go to Deebo Samuel here and there, but if it makes you guys feel any better, Ayuk and McCaffrey were the only two players on the team with over 2 targets. George Kittle only had 1, but we kind of know what to expect from George Kittle in these type of games. He's going to be the blocker, the main blocking tight end on this team, and he has those inconsistent games here and there, so that's not really that surprising. As for Deebo goes, I'm not too worried about him going forward. The 49ers are not going to blow out every single team like that. I mean, they could, but more likely than not, they're not going to blow out every team like that. Good news is he played the most snaps out of any receiver on this team and ran the most routes in this contest. In my opinion, there's going to be 100% better days for Deebo Samuel coming up. Next up, we got Cam Akers on this list. Some of you might be, whoa, Cam Akers is trash, buddy. Why do you have him on this list? He had his debut on Sunday with the Vikings, and I must say, he looked pretty good. I can't lie to you. He looked pretty good. 5 rushes for 40 yards and caught 2 passes for 11 yards in this game. He only played on 14 out of 48 snaps. But of course, we didn't expect him to have a full workload. We didn't even expect him to split carries with Alexander Mattison just yet at this point in time. Now, this is obviously more concerning for Mattison than it is for Cam Akers. I'd be buying low on Cam Akers, selling high on Alexander Mattison, because Madison's workload is going to get eaten into week after week after week. The most concerning part for Mattison also is that Akers was on the field for the majority of short yardage situations and just 1 less snap in goal line situations. So that's very interesting for me. If I'm being totally honest with you guys, how I think it's going to play out is, like I said, week after week after week, I think Cam Akers is slowly going to gain a bigger role in this offense. I think there's a real shot he could eventually take over that number 1 role. But like I said, if you have Alexander Mattison on your team and you're holding him right now, he had a decent week again. He had a decent week again last week. I'd be dishing him off. I really would be. But, do what you guys want. I think they're going to go with like kind of a ride the hot hand approach like they did with DeAndre Swift and Kenneth Gainwell in Philly, where whoever emerges as that number 1 back is going to get more of the workload. Right now, if you're going out to get Cam Akers, you're probably getting him for like one of your last bench spots. And people aren't expecting much from Cam Akers. And I've been seeing on a lot of websites that they think he is just a strict handcuff running back at the moment. I don't see it that way. I think he could potentially lead this team in rushing for the rest of the season once he actually starts getting more and more snaps in this offense. So buy low on Cam Akers, in my opinion. Next, we have Tony Pollard. He finished Sunday with 11 carries for 47 yards, caught 3 passes for 13 yards against the New England Patriots. This is another case of simply taking a look at the scoreboard. 38-3. Dallas's defense is not giving any of these guys chances to thrive because they're destroying people. All right, the defense isn't giving up barely any points per game. If you look at the past 4 games for Tony Pollard, the blowouts correlate exactly with the lack of carries in those 2 games so far. 14 carries against the New York Giants when they beat them 40-0, and then 11 carries in this past game against the New England Patriots when they beat them 38-3. So in these absolute beatdowns, Tony Pollard's not getting a lot of work, and he's coming out of the game early, which is giving more opportunities to people like Deuce Vaughn. On Sunday, Tony Pollard only played on 37 out of a possible 70 snaps, while Deuce Vaughn was in for those garbage time snaps, and he saw 22 snaps in this game. I do have to say Dallas's schedule is very similar to the Eagles, which we just talked about a little while ago. So super brutal schedule, but I think it actually plays into Tony Pollard's favor in this type of scenario because he's going to be on the field more of these snaps. They're not going to be blowout games. They're going to need their best players on the field at all times, and Tony Pollard is one of those lock and load #1 running backs that you should have on your fantasy team. If you can get him for a little bit of a value right now, I would definitely go for it. Next up, we have Chris Olave. 1 catch for 4 yards on 6 targets this past Sunday against the Buccaneers. Absolutely brutal fantasy football performance from him. I have to give it to Tampa Bay, though. They played a great defensive game. They locked him down, so I'm not taking anything away from them. But he definitely should have had a long touchdown pass. It landed right in his breadbasket, bounced off his fingertips. It was a beautifully thrown ball. He just dropped it. All right, that just cannot happen. That would have changed the whole dynamic of the day for Chris Olave, but sadly, he dropped it. Okay, now I think the reason for the lack of targets overall is pretty obvious. It has to do with Derek Carr and his AC joint sprain that he was dealing with. He wasn't even supposed to play in this game until right up to game time. Then they decided to play him. This caused him to check the ball down so many times. He threw 14 passes to Alvin Kamara in his first game back. Almost all these catches, by the way, only went for about 2 yards. They weren't any, game-changing plays by any means. Kamara ended up with more touches in this game than all the Saints receivers combined, which is crazy. That's not going to keep happening going forward. Give Derek Carr a few weeks here to recover from that injury, and then I think Chris Olave will be good as new. So keep an eye. If he keeps struggling these next couple of weeks, I think he is going to continue to be a buy low candidate for the rest of the year. Next up, we have Jerome Ford. All right, I'm seeing a lot of people, a lot of these videos are saying, sell high on Jerome Ford, get him off your team. We don't want anything to do with Jerome Ford. I don't really understand that, because later on in the season, you're going to see what we're talking about in just a second here. First of all, this game on Sunday was an absolute blowout. So we're going to take 9.5 PPR fantasy points from Jerome Ford when they are losing 28-3. The Browns were doing their best Bengals impression, or the Patriots impression, on this day. There was a lot of blowouts in the NFL, I must say. Deshaun Watson was out in this game, so I am going to give him a break compared to the other teams. I know Joe Burrow was injured, but at least he played. You had your starting quarterback. You couldn't put up any points. Still, the semi-encouraging part about this game, though, for Jerome Ford was, once again, he was the clear leader in snaps and routes ran on the team. Pierre Strong once again came in very late in this game, got some garbage carries. He had 5 carries to scare everybody off. Everybody's going, whoa, sell Jerome Ford. Pierre Strong is getting so many carries in this offense. No, that's not how it's going. All right, the reason that I like Ford actually isn't for the next couple of games. I don't think he performs the best the next couple of games, but the end of the year is where I think he really is he's going to be a nice future play for you. His last 6 games of the fantasy football season consist of the Pittsburgh Steelers, a terrible defense right now, the Denver Broncos, who have a terrible defense, the Rams, I guess, they have an all right defense right now, Jaguars don't have the best defense, Chicago Bears don't have the best defense, Houston Texans, and the New York Jets. All right, so I just named 7 games. I said I was going to name 6. I named just 7. All right, that's the final 7 games right there. Not the hardest matchups. I'd say 6 out of those 7 games are pretty gimme matchups. So Jerome Ford should perform well. I think if he struggles in these next couple of weeks, very similar to Chris Olave, he's a clear buy low candidate in my eyes. All right, next up, we're going to go over some guys that I think you should be buying into the hype on. These are guys that are performing well at the moment, so I guess they're kind of buy highs, if you will. The first player on this list is Isiah Pacheco, and I have to start out this by saying that I made a crucial mistake last week, and I owe you guys an apology. Some of you guys won't accept the apology, and that's understandable. You can call me a fraud, you can call me an idiot, do whatever you want. I made a crucial mistake. Sometimes I overlook things. Most of the time I catch the things, but sometimes I just don't see it. All right, and with Isiah Pacheco, I do still stand on the fact that this is a 3-headed backfield, and he's not going to get all the touches every single week in this offense. But I shouldn't have said to sell high on him strictly because of this schedule. The schedule going forward is something that I didn't look into, and I do apologize for that. Let's go through the schedule together, and you tell me why you should want Isiah Pacheco on your team the rest of the year. The Minnesota Vikings, let's start it off there. Not a great defense. Denver Broncos, one of the worst defenses in the league right now. The Chargers can't stop anybody. Denver Broncos, again, one of the worst defenses. Miami Dolphins, they're not going to stop you. The Dolphins just gave up a ton of points to the Buffalo Bills. James Cook had a good day. They're not a great defense either. The Philadelphia Eagles, I'll give you that. That's a tough game. The Raiders, not a tough game. Green Bay Packers, rushing defense, not good. Buffalo Bills, that's a tough game. New England Patriots, that's a tough game. Las Vegas Raiders, bad defense again. And then the Cincinnati Bengals are struggling right now. Just gave up a ton of points to Derrick Henry. So we're looking at this schedule. There are 3 tough games the rest of the season. Isiah Pacheco has the potential to carry you to your fantasy football playoffs, and that's my fault. Just telling you to trade him away is totally my fault because I didn't look at the schedule. If I had looked at the schedule, there's no way I would have said that. Absolutely not. This past Sunday, although in the past weeks, McKinnon was more involved in the passing game, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was involved in the passing game here and there, Pacheco got all the targets. He got 3 targets in this game, which we didn't see in previous weeks. So that's even more encouraging. And I mean, like I said, the schedule that's as simple as it gets. The schedule is super easy. Has to be the easiest schedule out of all running backs. There's no doubt in my mind. Anyways, we are moving on to DeAndre Swift. Once again, in week number 4, Swift increased his snap count percentage over Kenneth Gainwell and saw 10 more carries in this matchup. It's really getting difficult to keep doubting DeAndre Swift. I know the main argument about DeAndre Swift is that he might get injured again. Well, so could anybody. So could anybody in the league. The reason that he got injured so many times in the past was actually Ford Field's turf just got changed. All right, that turf was horrible for running back injuries in the past. Also, for DeAndre Swift, he's not only getting involved in the running game in Philadelphia right now, he's getting involved in the passing game, which is amazing to see. In week number 4, Swift had another good game, carrying the ball 14 times for 56 yards and a touchdown, caught 4 passes for 23 yards, while Gainwell only carried the ball 4 times for 14 yards and caught 2 passes for just 7 yards. The Eagles' schedule right now, like we said earlier, gets insanely tough after the next couple of games, but that shouldn't be a problem at all for DeAndre Swift, especially because one of his strong suits in his game is his receiving work. Wouldn't surprise me in the slightest the rest of the season if DeAndre Swift finishes in the top 5 running backs. I'd be going right now, buying high on him. Buying high on both Pacheco, Swift, and Marquise Brown right here. He's been the number 1 option so far for Joshua Dobbs, who has looked much better than anyone could have possibly imagined so far this year. This was supposed to potentially be a tank season for the Arizona Cardinals, maybe get that number 1 pick, but they are outperforming everybody's expectations. They are really putting up a hell of a fight in almost every game, excluding this past week against the San Francisco 49ers. That's one of the best teams in the National Football League, so we'll give them a little bit of a pass there. But even in that game, they still had some good fantasy viable players. James Conner going forward, Hollywood Brown, maybe even Michael Wilson. I wouldn't mind having on my fantasy teams. Maybe Zach Ertz as well. As for Marquise Brown goes, though, he has been super consistent over the last 3 weeks. 17.4, 17.1, 16.6 in PPR leagues. That's crazy consistent numbers, and you'll take that all day of the week. Brown plays the most snaps on the team by far, more than any other wide receiver, and earns the most targets out of any other wide receiver. Zach Ertz, as the tight end of this team, does receive a lot of targets, I must say. He's a little target thief for Marquise Brown owners, but it is what it is. You can have 2 fantasy viable receivers on this team. Heading into the next couple of weeks and the rest of the season, I'm really expecting the Cardinals to have to throw the ball more than a little bit. They're going to be having to throw the ball a lot to stay involved in these games. So Marquise Brown is not a bad option at all, and he should have plenty of options going forward. Go out right now, trade for Marquise Brown before it's too late. Last but not least, we have Terry McLaurin. He's finally back to looking like, himself. He's finally back to 100%. After that turf toe injury that was, keeping him a little bit limited throughout the first couple of weeks of the season. He runs the most routes on this Commanders football team, as well as playing the most snaps and commanding the most targets on a weekly basis. This is another fantasy football guy that you just love to have on your team. He's been super consistent for the past couple of years now. And even in these last couple of weeks here, dealing with that turf toe injury, put up 16.4, 10.1, and 22.6 in the last 3 games. You'll take that. Now, I'm really hoping the Commanders can keep some of that momentum from that Eagles game and move that into the following weeks because they looked like completely flat the first couple of games. Heading into the rest of the season, I'm really hoping that Sam Howell continues building that chemistry with Terry McLaurin because even as of right now, Sam Howell's favorite target is clearly Terry McLaurin, and it should be. He has good reason to look for Terry McLaurin on most of these routes. Anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to, as always, drop a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you are new. I will catch you in the next one. Peace out.